Kessel is a Stanley Cup champion. Again. Still Kessel, if you will. But this video's not off to a good start. The Pittsburgh Penguins are your 2017 Stanley Cup champions. Back to back. I gotta change out of this. My buddy Mike gave me this last year. Thanks for the child shirt, Mike. There, I got this at the 2016 Stanley Cup final when the Penguins were there last year. First and foremost, let's call the Pittsburgh Penguins what they are. Not just the Stanley Cup champions, but true greatness. For years, for the better part of a decade now, we've been talking about the Chicago Blackhawks like they are the cream of the crop in hockey. They've won 3 Stanley Cups since 2010, which is incredible, but the Penguins have won 3 since 2009, and they did something that the Blackhawks were not able to do, and that's win back-to-back. So can Malkin be in the top 100 now or what? In a 30-team league that is going to grow to a 31-team league very soon, it is near impossible to repeat as Cup champions. In 2009, the Detroit Red Wings came close, winning the Stanley Cup in 2008, and then losing, ironically, to the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2009. The last hockey team to win the Stanley Cup in back-to-back seasons was the Detroit Red Wings in 1997 and 1998. To give you an idea of the conversation that this year's Pittsburgh Penguins now belong in, here are some of the names on the 98 Red Wings roster. Just to name a few: Steve Yzerman, Nicholas Lidstrom, Brendan Shanahan, Vyacheslav Kozlov, Larry Murphy, Igor Larionov. Kirk Maltby and Chris Draper were both on the Canadian Olympic team. Thomas Holmstrom's butt caused nightmares for goalies for years. Sergei Fedorov is so far down this list because he only played 21 games in the regular season, and Chris Osgood in net. How many players on that team are currently in the Hockey Hall of Fame or will be in the Hall of Fame someday? Well, I got something to tell you. This Pittsburgh Penguins team, this injured shell of its former regular season self, Pittsburgh Penguins team, just did what the 98 Red Wings did. Jake Guentzel only played 40 games with the Penguins because he spent 33 games in the American Hockey League. That guy scored 13 goals, 21 points in 25 Stanley Cup playoff games. That's like walking down the street, bending down and picking up a $100 bill, except instead of a $100 bill, you got one of the most prolific playoff goal-scoring rookies ever. Add that to a team with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Phil Kessel up front, to a team where Patrick Hornqvist is like not even one of the first forwards you mentioned. By the way, Patrick Hornqvist scored his Stanley Cup winning goal. And by the way, there's another guy who missed like half the playoffs for the Penguins. Calling themselves the Penguins does no justice to the team. They're not some cute little bird that likes to hang out in the water and eat fish. They remind me of another seafaring creature, the Hydra. For every head that you cut off of it, 2 grow in its place. Matt Murray is an excellent goalie and already a Stanley Cup champion. Guess what? Injured in the opening night of the playoffs. Marc-Andre Fleury comes in and is arguably the best goalie in the playoffs. Then he starts to falter. Guess what? Matt Murray is back and healthy again. All this, by the way, from a team who traded away Mike Condon for a late pick early in the season. And for the fans, the 2 dueling fan bases, this was Smashville's real coming out party. I know, Preds fans, I know you're rolling your eyes, you don't want to hear that, but to a lot of the hockey world, they were kind of oblivious. But I think the way it was portrayed for a while is, oh, there is nothing like the Smashville experience. And honestly, I gotta say, there is nothing that I've experienced like that. I got to go to Game 3. But one thing I will say compared pretty closely to that was Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final last year where I got this shirt. That game was in Pittsburgh. This thing, I think, was portrayed as Nashville just being easily the craziest hockey town out there. When in reality, this was a battle of 2 heavyweights. The ratings showed it. The interest showed it. Everyone wanted to watch this series. Pittsburgh taking on Nashville. Not necessarily 2 of the biggest markets by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely 2 of the most passionate fan bases, certainly in the United States. And on that note, Nashville, Smashville. Oh, I gotta put this on. It's still yellow, you can't tell. I doubt there's anything I can say in this video that'll make you feel better. So, I'm sorry if you were looking for that. But holy smokes, not that you needed me to say it, but congratulations on an incredible season, an incredible Stanley Cup run. They kind of reminded me a little bit of the Pittsburgh Penguins last season, where they struggled to even make the playoffs. Like, it's still around halfway through, and you're like, are they even gonna make it? And then just like Pittsburgh, there they are in the Stanley Cup Final. They came in as the 2nd wild card seed, which definitely makes them the underdog until you sweep the Chicago Blackhawks. And people kind of played up the underdog line for the rest of the playoffs, but no, once you sweep Chicago, you are no longer the underdog ever. Easily dispatched the Chicago Blackhawks. The Blues put up a bit more of a fight, but they were gone too. And the Ducks, they were feisty as ever, but the Preds dealt with them too, even though they lost Ryan Johansson halfway through, which, by the way, they lost Ryan Johansson halfway through. That honestly might have been the difference in their series with Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh was broken and shattered, but one thing they did not lack at all was depth at center. For so much of the playoffs, we were talking about the 1-2 punch that McDavid and Leon Draisaitl is, when in fact, the best 1-2 punch in the NHL is still, and has been for a long time, Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Because it goes without saying, you lose Nick Bonino, yes, that's unfortunate, you still have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Matt Cullen's chilling back there too. The Preds were going to be in tough up the middle with Ryan Johansson. Without, it looked like a losing battle. But shoot, if they didn't push the play for a fair chunk of this series, Calle Jarnkrok rising to the occasion, Colton Sissons with a heck of a playoffs, and almost a very big goal. Are we going to talk about that? Probably should. So, one of the things that impressed me the most from any team in any situation this season was how the Predators handled that blown call after the game. With class, with dignity, and with sportsmanship. But I'm not the Nashville Predators, so the refs completely blew that call. The puck was loose, he blew his whistle, and the Predators scored what should have been the go-ahead goal in that game. We should be watching overtime of Game 6 right now. It should be in the quadruple billionth overtime. I don't care. That game should never have... I saw so many people like, hey, it's part of the game. If the ref loses sight of the puck, he's supposed to blow the play dead. What's he supposed to do? Hey, have you ever refed? It's hard. Have you ever refed? Listen, nothing you're saying is necessarily wrong. But if that happened to your team, you would be apoplectic. Let's say Patrick Hornqvist still scores that goal with just under 2 minutes to play. It's a tie game, man. It's a tie game. But hey, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, who knows, maybe the Sens would have been in the Stanley Cup final. Maybe the Capitals would have pulled it off against Pittsburgh. They didn't. All sports, hockey especially, is full of ifs and buts. Teams play differently when they have the lead. That's a fact. Teams also play differently when they're down a goal. That's a fact. If the Predators go up 1-0 there, who knows? Maybe the Penguins win that game 7-1. We'll never know. I don't know what it was about Nashville that everyone seemed to love, everyone seemed to get drawn into. Was it the infectious energy? Was it all the chants? Was it how much people loved, how much fun everyone in Nashville seemed to be having? Was it, perhaps, PK Subban? Look, a lot of people hate the guy, and I'm sure a lot of people wanted to see him lose, but I'm willing to bet that a fair chunk of all hockey fans, especially Canadian hockey fans, were watching to see PK Subban win the Stanley Cup. Ooh, was he close? Came very close to pulling off of Phil Kessel, but unfortunately it was Phil Kessel's turn to pull off of Phil Kessel again. Nashville fans, I'm sure I'm not helping you at all right now, but if you're not a fan of a Western Conference team, how are you not cheering for the Preds to make it back next year? That was so much fun. Not just the fans, not just the energy. The team on the ice was great to watch. But right now, it's all about the bitter taste of defeat. Nothing that a little Listerine won't fix, though. Sidney Crosby, and Evgeny Malkin for that matter, but Sidney Crosby in particular. Before they even won the Stanley Cup, before he won his third, he was an all-time great. This just cements his legacy. Not that it was ever on the line in the first place, as some people ridiculously suggested. Forget back-to-back Stanley Cups, back-to-back Conn Smythe. Some people talk about, he might not have deserved it this year, he might not have even deserved it the year before. Look, if you have ever watched Sidney Crosby live, I can't imagine what it would be like to have a ballot in front of you. And you got to talk about who the best player was and writing down a different name. All the games I've ever seen him play, whether he put up 5 points or 0, he's the best player on the ice. There's a reason for that. He's the best hockey player on planet Earth. You could argue that it's Connor McDavid, and it just might be, maybe especially next year, but Sidney Crosby, for the last decade plus, has been our Gretzky. How dare you even mention anyone in the same sentence as Gretzky? Look at the era-adjusted numbers in a league where no one scores anymore. He scores all the time. He's a Hockey Hall of Famer if he retires tomorrow, and here's the scary thing for the rest of the league. He's not retiring tomorrow. What else? Oh, Marc-Andre Fleury handing the Stanley Cup to Matt Murray. Just perfect. It's all but guaranteed that Fleury has played his final game with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And you know what? He went out with a bang. He went out in an extremely appropriate way. Carrying the load, straight up stealing a series from the Washington Capitals, and then handing off the reins to Matt Murray. He handed him the net. He handed him the team, and appropriately, he ended it by handing him the Stanley Cup. How perfect is it seeing old-timers like Ron Hainsey and Mark Streit getting the cup? Frank Corrado, anyone? No Chris Letang for a single playoff game? Are you kidding me? Mike Sullivan has never lost a playoff series as the Pittsburgh Penguins head coach. You know who also has not lost a playoff series with the Pittsburgh Penguins? Both Phil Kessel and Justin Schultz. And how poetic, and probably heartbreaking if you're a Nashville Predators fan, is it that Patrick Hornqvist scored the cup-winning goal. So often when I'm making these Stanley Cup videos, we talk about how on earth are they going to do it again? How are they going to keep this team together? Well, just looking at the roster, with the exception of Marc-Andre Fleury, who looks likely to be going to Vegas, and Matt Cullen, who looks likely to be retiring, the Penguins should look very similar next year. And if they don't, well, apparently Jim Rutherford knows what he's doing. And who knows which college free agent, draft pick, or random AHL call-up is going to carry their team for a few weeks next year. The management, the coaching, the players, the fans, the Pittsburgh Penguins are just the cream of the crop in the NHL right now. There's no shame in saying it because it's true. Congratulations to the Pittsburgh Penguins on winning their second consecutive Stanley Cup, and congrats to Penguins fans. I'm sure you don't need to be told, but you guys are spoiled rotten. And you handle the everyone hating you thing pretty well. But people hate greatness. Consider it a compliment. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you liked this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends that Phil Kessel is still a Stanley Cup champion.